Hi, welcome to Coffee and Closers. I'm Mikkel Abador, and I want to personally invite you to join me and one of today's top performing sales stars for a cup of coffee and authentic conversation. And our collective goal is that you will walk away with tangible knowledge that you can apply to your sales efforts today. Are you ready? We'll grab a cup, fill it up, and let's get into another episode of Coffee and Closers.
Well, welcome to Coffee and Closers. Put your hands together. Every single one of you is a difference maker right now. The fact that you took time out of your day to come here to learn means that you're among the elite. So thank you. Who I'm about to introduce is a social selling legend. Does everyone know what social selling is? Nobody. Good. Well, John, do you want to cover that when we get up here? So John has quite the tale, and he started doing social selling before it was a thing. I mean, he's got some stories that he's going to tell. We had our intro call with him and I, and I've known John for a while. I've wanted him on the show forever, but he's too busy, selling shows and programs to Discovery Channel. He's too busy creating the YouTube channel for drone racing air views. And most recently, I can't get him out of a Tesla, except for today. He's the guy behind Travels. If you guys are familiar, it's one of the first Tesla rental companies in the state, and I believe in the nation, right? John's behind that. You guys will learn a lot. But how he got there is what's interesting. How he smashed marketing, how he smashed sales together, and how he learned along the way. You guys are in for a treat. Please put your hands together for March's guest, John Marino. All right, so I got 2 hours with you, and you guys, and we've known each other for a bit.
Yeah.
But I think that 2 hours. So mind you, our setup call is supposed to be 15 to 30 minutes. So I don't know who to blame, probably me. But I got so interested in some of these tales that you were telling. But I'd love to hear more about John and what's driven you from the start of your youth to now, and then we can talk about social selling.
Sure, no problem. Well, thank you for having me. Yeah. So my background is in 2003, I started my first company, and it was in the printing business. And you would go online and you order like business cards, letterhead, envelopes, or anything like that. And we grew it really quick. We were doing over $1 million in revenue within the first 16 months or what have you. And we were generating a lot of revenue, but we weren't making any money. And I don't know if anybody's ever experienced any of that, where there's no profit. And so we were like, gosh, we're working really hard and we're not getting paid for this. What can we do? And so we looked at what was the most profitable product that we were printing, and it turned out to be book printing. Because books, our average print job was $5,000, and our average print job for everything else was about $500. So we were like, okay, we'll just print books. So after about 2 years into it, we switched over to book printing, and then that morphed into book publishing. And we were working as a contract publisher. And the nice part about that is that you meet a lot of great writers and authors. And then in March of 2010, I sold out on that company. And then I started a digital marketing agency in social media. And in 2010, Facebook was just a few years old. And I would go around and I would talk to small businesses about managing their social media, and they were like, well, is this thing for real? Is Facebook going to be around? Is Twitter for real? And that was interesting, and then we came up with a nice way, which we'll get into, I'm sure, of how to present it to make people sign up and say yes. And then from there, I did that for 7 years, and then 2 years ago, I started a Tesla car rental company, the first one in the state. And now we're growing and doing that. So, yeah.
Is that amazing? Put your hands together for John. All right, so this is a sales show.
Yes.
So we're going to focus on sales for a bit.
Yep.
Who doesn't want to hear about the travel story and all the other stories that I'm kind of keeping from you? Yeah, everybody. Nobody raised their hand. What's up with that? You're just here for the sales. I got it. Talk to me about social selling, because you're kind of, when we talked on the phone, how you learned, kind of how, the process that you kind of implemented right off the bat was learned from a rep that you kind of
pitched to, right? I feel like I should go back to the beginning. So when I started the online printing company, we would spend $5,000 a month on Google and Overture, which is used to be Yahoo's platform. And we grew it, and we were doing about $80,000 a month, and then we would do $120,000 a month. And this is all, mind you, in 2003, 2004, when Google was only a couple years old. I mean, Google themselves, basically got kicked in about 2001. And I always tell people, when your mortgage depends on it, you're going to figure it out. And we did figure it out, and we had a nice little sales generator there. And then when social media started, that's when I really took a lot of fascination in 2008, to Twitter, and then 2010. So when I sold the company, I started that. But what was interesting is, how do you dial in social media and make it something useful where people can put numbers to it? Because marketing people only want to buy from you if they can reduce it to a number and a metric, right? How many have
anyone relate?
Yeah, anybody relate?
People?
So what I did, and I told this story to you, and I'll tell it here, is so what I did is, so when I started my printing company, I was visited by Verizon Super Pages. Does anybody remember Super Pages from back in the day?
It's that big phone book that would get stuck to your doorway in the winter.
Yeah. And then Super Pages was their online version, okay? And so the guy came into my office, and I'll never forget this in all the years I've ever been doing sales. He came into the office, and he said, "Hey, John, how many times do people visit printing, on Super Pages?" Like, let's say it was 1,000 clicks, okay, 1,000 views. And then he would be like, "What's your average sale?" And I would be like, "Oh, $500. And then he would be like, "Okay, so how many times do you need the phone to ring?" And I would be like, 10 times. And he's like, "Okay, so you do like $5,000 in revenue based off of, to place an ad with us was like $700 a month," or something to that effect. Then he had this nice little worksheet. And so I was really impressed, and it's hard to say no when the numbers add up, and you're like, it's a no-brainer. You got to do it. So we did it. We spent like, I don't remember, because then he upsold me on a bunch of stuff, and it was like $14,000 a year. But it made sense. It totally made sense. And so then when I went into social media and selling social media, I remembered that worksheet. So I said, hey, again, this is way before Facebook changed their algorithms and everything, but I said, hey, on average, every person has 300 people who follow them, and then 50%. And I put this whole worksheet together, this whole formula based off of Verizon Super Pages and how this guy sold to me 7 years previous. And so then when I would go through the worksheet and I talk to a business, I'd be like, on average, what's your average sale? And then I would be like, on average, how many people would come? And from there, we were able to get clients, and we got a lot of clients. And at our peak, we had over 40 different clients that we're managing around the Twin Cities. And I touched so many different. So how it worked in the beginning is that we would cold call, and we had certain industries, restaurants, hotels, jewelers was always a good one for us. And then we would do the sales presentation. People would sign up. And then from there, it just kind of snowballed into a lot of networking and referrals and what have you. But in the beginning, the first 2 years, it was just literally just crushing it, doing, hand-to-hand combat and sales. So
how many marketing people, how many people in sales enablement, how many social sellers? Yeah? Could you kind of expand on this? Because I just want to know, because at that time, were people selling social, were people selling marketing that way? It sounds pretty strategic, and I hadn't heard of that before we talked.
Right, yeah. So I always compared it to, so I started in, like I said, 2003, and the internet, I know it's been around longer, but for all intents and purposes, let's say it started in 98. Where like professionally, where businesses were all like, we all have to have a website. So in 2003, the internet, like for all intents and purposes, has only been around for 5 years. And nobody really knew what a website was. And you talk to so many different people, and they're like, didn't know how to do it or curate it or what kind of content. And they basically a lot of businesses would just put their contact information, a little bit of other services, and that was it. That was the beginning of the internet. Well, in 2010, it was very much like that with social media. They were like, well, what's this Twitter thing? I don't get it. And then they were like, what's Facebook all about? I don't get it. And they were also like Foursquare was really big at the time. And Foursquare was a huge driver for us because people would check in. So you could legitimately say people were at your business. That was a legitimate metric that we would use. And it was very much, the sentiment was very similar to people starting on the internet. Like, oh, is this internet thing going to be around? And then there was like, oh, is this social media going to be around? And I'd be like, guys and gals, I'd be like, there's 500 million people on Facebook. Of course it's not going anywhere. And the skepticism was unreal. So I knew that I had to put a metric to everything that we were doing, and that was part of our sales, and then that's how we would close deals.
That's amazing. Do you guys still apply that process, that kind of ROI-led process to sales today?
We do. So how I apply it to today is that everything, of course, from my marketing days has a metric to it, and you don't want to do anything without it fiscally making sense, because you got to measure when you spend money like $20,000 on YouTube ads. You got to know exactly what your call to action is and how you're going to measure success. So everything I did in my digital marketing agency, as it grew and expanded and we grew our media buying, we wanted to make sure there was a metric to it. And so it definitely influenced everything I've ever done.
That's amazing. So can we kind of fast forward? We're going to talk about successes and failures, but I really want to hear kind of about now. I mean, some of the projects that you've started probably were influenced. You said, because if you can market and sell, you can do anything. Amen? Yeah?
Amen.
I mean, we have some founders here. I see the float guys. I told you about John. We got the sales reach guy. Just kidding. I love Josh. Could you kind of talk about that confidence that maybe saying, all right, this is, I learned this, I can apply it to a social agency that I have created. Now I have other projects that I want to apply that. Was there kind of a progression to say, man, I could do anything with this knowledge?
Well, I've definitely had some success, but I've also had some failures. And my failures have helped me fail forward. So one example that I'll give you is that so I worked in all these different apps and all these different social media platforms, and I noticed that there wasn't anything specifically around shopping. So in 2013, I started Mashlot, and what Mashlot was a social shopping app where you would basically take pictures of what you were buying and post it to your friends. And at the time, you know, with Twitter being as big as it was, I knew that influencer marketing, before it was even a thing, was a big deal. And so I got like Paris Hilton, I got Kylie and Kendall Jenner, I got Kris Jenner, I got something like 17 celebrities to tweet out about Mashlot. So I was really excited to work with all these celebrities, and I was really excited, of course, about the app. And I was excited for all the buzz, and we got written up in a bunch of places, and we got a bunch of downloads, which is extremely hard to get. And literally 2 months later, my wife at the time said, I want a divorce. And that just killed everything. And that was a huge punch in the gut. And when you go through a divorce and you go through something personal, it really will stop you dead in your tracks in your professional life. And so for the following year, for 2014, I had to go through a divorce and basically stop. And that was a big failure of mine, was not being able to kind of really follow through on the momentum and execute professionally. There just was no way for me to save that on a personal level. So I can definitely empathize with anybody going through a personal struggle while trying to build a professional career.
Amen. Thanks for sharing that. It's one of these things about this show that I love, and we never designed it to be, but it really kind of brings authenticity, because sales is we're in the business of hearing no. Right? I mean, we hear a yes, but that's the result of how many no's. And so everybody goes through these pains and these struggles, and the fact that you're able to share that with us, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. So let's talk about successes. And I want to hear specifically, if you're open to it, is your climb from, okay, so we've got the digital, we've got Travels. I want to hear the whole story. Where did you get this idea? How did you articulate it? And then how did you execute? Because it's been quite a story.
For Travels. So in my digital marketing agency, one of my last clients, this venture capitalist came up to me and said, hey, John, I just spent $40 million on a drone manufacturing company, and I want to create the YouTube for drones. And I was like, cool. And then he was like, I was like, well, what's your budget? Because everything comes down to budget. How much are people spending? And he's like, no, I have a 7-figure budget. And I was like, really? He's like, yes. I'm like, I can work with that. Let's do this thing. So he wanted everything, and just to like literally do a scope of work, you know, just to write the proposal. I was like, you want so many different things. I got to charge you $10,000 just to write the estimate. I mean, because it was literally that much work. His mind was everywhere. And he's like, no problem. Cuts a check. And I'm like, and I was just coming off the heels of my divorce. And I was like, perfect. Let's do this thing. So we created that. And what was nice about it is when you have a budget, you can do a lot of creative things. So we did everything from, we were flying drones, and we had billboards in Times Square. We sponsored different events at even like the Playboy Mansion. We were doing things down in Florida.
Don't get
yachts.
excited, Josh. Don't get excited.
And then we were hiring film crews, and we were able to create different channels and content specifically for the platform. And it's still around today. It's called Air Views. And that was a lot of fun. Well, after about 17, 18 months of working with them, he decided to buy out the entire team. There's about 30 people working on the campaign. He wrote me a check. Well, at that time, that week, I was at a Caribou here in Uptown, and I was sitting going, well, what do I do next? Do I hire more people, go out and get more clients, or do I do something else? And at that time, that's when Tesla pre-sold 400,000 Model 3s in 1 week. And I was like, wow, if you make the brand affordable, there's a huge market for this. And then I was like, well, what do I do with this? And then I was like, okay, well, I bet you if everybody's going to be on the road driving these cars, I bet you then other people will get in accidents, or they'll travel, and they'll want to stay in electric cars. And so there should be a place to rent a car. And I also was like looking to travel to like Chicago, and you couldn't rent one at the time. And so I was like, well, this is going to make a lot of sense. And so I would call up Tesla stores all across the country and say, hey, what do you think about a Tesla car rental? And they're like, oh yeah, this would be a huge demand. Everybody said it was going to be successful. And I was like, all right, cool. So from my agency, I knew I had to create a brand. So I created a brand. And then I ran into a roadblock of trying to find insurance, because every insurance company was like, well, that's an exotic car rental. And they would put me in this box. Oh, like, Teslas are very expensive. Nobody likes Tesla in the auto industry. And so it took me 8 months to come up with a solution. And then after 8 months of talking to all these insurance companies, I was literally sitting at home, and I said a prayer. I was like, God, give me some direction here. Like, I cannot believe this is, I'm going to stumble before I even get out the gate. And I had like literally an epiphany, and it was like, well, there's got to be an independent business association in the car rental business. There's got to be somebody in this business who can tell me where to get insurance. And I Googled it, found the guy. He's in Phoenix, called him. He was like, oh, yeah, all these independent car rental businesses across the country, they're all on one policy, and you could just join our policy. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah. So within 24 hours, I filled out the application, and within 7 days, we got through underwriting, and within 7 days after that, boom, we're up and operational. And it was just that fast. It took me like 8 months to come up and go, there's an independent business association for everything in life, and when all else fails, talk to the association within that industry, and they'll give you the answers. And then it just clicked.
Huh.
Wow.
And how's business been? How's business been? How have you accelerated it?
So in the beginning, I knew that we wanted to market and partner with hotels. And so the first hotel that we got on board was Hotel Ivy in downtown Minneapolis. And we threw a big launch party. And then from there, about a year ago, we opened up at the Mall of America 2 weeks before the Super Bowl, and we ran that through October of last year, and then now we're in the process of moving to the MSP airport as well as in different markets. So we're also in very close to finishing up in Las Vegas to be right on the Las Vegas Strip with a major hotel partner. So we're super excited about that this year.
Yeah. And what's been the best strategy to acquire new customers? Like how have you acquired new clientele?
So social selling, I've never stopped. I mean, I still believe in Facebook. I still believe in Google, Twitter, Instagram.
What is social selling? Because there was a lot of hands that didn't go up when I asked. Would you mind? I told you I was going to call you out and have you explain your version, but
yeah. I mean, social selling means a lot of things these days. A lot of people in the marketing world and advertising will call it influencer marketing. For myself, social selling is just using any of the social media platforms. When I started, my first company was all off of Google, and that's when DoubleClick was big and Overture was big, and you had like 3-4 different ways that you could go. And then when I started the agency, there seems to be like a plethora of options. And so when I sit down with different clients, it was like, well, where's our customer live? And then we would have to develop that story. And after running 450 campaigns and spending tens of millions of dollars of other people's money, I started to see an algorithm of where people live and how people get influenced to make purchasing decisions. And so with the Tesla car rental, I still am a huge fan of Facebook, of Instagram, and then online, because it's in the travel business. And so when you're traveling, you're going to book a hotel, you're going to book an airline ticket, and most likely, if you need it, you're going to book a car, and then you're going to find that online as well. So we live right where the traveler lives, and we're part of that conversation the whole way through. And as Travels grows, we will always be in the most popular travel destinations across the country.
Right on. So I'm going to share this. Hopefully that's cool. So the first time I ever met John, actually, there's 2 ways I met John. One was pictures of him on Instagram with a friend of mine, Paul DeBettings, if you guys know, Minnesota Headhunter, having the best parties and the best time ever. We're talking, there's parties that we used to host, like costume parties, right? And then there's John's parties. They were incredible. I'm like, I got to get to know this guy. So then we lined up a meeting. I got a chance to sit down with you and hang out. And next name was Jeff Timmons. Do you guys know who Jeff Timmons is of 98 Degrees? He's arguably one of three other singers. There's 4 of them, but that sing one of my favorite Christmas albums of all time. If you don't know 90, what's that?
Everybody knows Nick Lachey.
Yeah, everyone knows Nick Lachey, but Jeff Timmons is he's the ripped guy, Anyway, I'm like, who is this guy? So what I'd like to hear is kind of, influencer marketing and kind of where it's at today, because there's kind of some stories of how can it sustain where people are paying, $100,000 a like, or what do you think the future of influencer marketing? I consider you an influencer marketer. I know you probably don't like to hear that, but I consider you an influencer marketing. I'd love to hear your take on where it's headed.
Well, every brand has an audience, and whether you're selling B2B or B2C, it's really important to identify who are the influencers within your industry. And sometimes it's obvious and sometimes it's not. And influencer marketing, what people are doing now in the social selling is they're identifying people who are basically the leaders who have the biggest audience. And then you need to learn how to leverage that. So like years ago, we would do contests. So like, let's take, for example, the drone guy. So to build an audience on social media, we would give away drones. So we would talk to people who were traveling a lot, and we would like, hey, we want to give you a drone and then give one away to your audience. And so we'd be like, follow us here, comment on 3 people you'd like to travel with for a chance to win. And we were giving away a drone a week, which was about $1,000 a week gift or a prize. And that worked, and you build up that audience because it's really, really important to have a real audience. I know all the tricks of the trade to build up an audience of what you would call either fake accounts or international accounts. And I also know how it is important to build an audience that is real, that is authentic, that is really real people there, and what the difference is. And through that, I was able to work with a lot of different people, because the other thing that this guy wanted to do, who was my client, is he wanted to start a TV show about drones. And I was like, well, like, what kind of TV show? And he was like, no, on national television. And I was like, that's expensive. You know, what's your budget? You know, always coming down to what's your budget. He's like, I don't know, what do these things cost? And I was like, well, just to do a pilot. I mean, if you're talking the real deal, I was like, to do a pilot, you know, it's about $300,000 to $400,000 just to do a pilot, shoot it, shop it, and then no guarantees that any network or anybody's going to pick this thing up. And he was like, I'm in. I was like, really? He's like, wired me the money. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I got like the unicorn client here. This is amazing. So I went to work. I knew a lot of people in TV and different producers. And then through that, you know, when you start talking around about what you're trying to do, I ended up naturally in Las Vegas because there's so many good, talented people. It's either Vegas or LA. So I ended up meeting Jeff Timmons of 98 Degrees. And through his network, it's amazing when you work with a celebrity and he's on LinkedIn and he goes, I want to talk to somebody in pay-per-view, or I want to talk to somebody or whatever. He just, like, people like will respond to him. So I was like, wow, I could never get this kind of like immediate attention. Like whoever you could dream of or think of. And so then I was like, I selfishly kind of used his network for my own personal gain. And I was like, well, what about like Britney Spears, you know? And he was like, oh, yeah, you know, Britney performed on our stage before she was Britney, and we have the same manager who's Larry Rudolph. And yeah, I can do why don't we just do the lunch to the three of us? Okay, let's do that.
Britney Spears?
So
anybody else grow up in the 90s? Come on.
I go to the lunch with Larry Rudolph, and Larry Rudolph, I mean, if anybody knows Britney Spears, I mean, he managed her through every crisis she ever had. And I was just like, couldn't believe I'm sitting in front of such talented people. And I was sharing the vision of what we were trying to do with the TV show and what we're trying to do with a few other projects that were in the works. And, you know, the good news is that people are always being creative of how to reach audiences. And even the people at the highest levels are trying to do the thing that people, you know, here in the Twin Cities are trying to do, which is trying to connect and build relationships and build it. And that's why my hat's off to you for even doing Coffee&Closers and building this community here. It's a fantastic idea, and I'm really proud of you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, put your hands together for me. Thank you. I'm just kidding. Thank you, brother. Yeah. Coming from you, that's amazing. So I got a couple, 2 questions left. Not even? Okay. So you guys are going to get your chance. Just if you have any questions and you haven't thought of them yet, get ready, because I know you guys' hands go up once the cord's cut. I got 2 questions and I'm going to go real quick. If you were to name one crown jewel, one of your biggest successes that you consider, you know, if today were my last, this is my success, and it could be personal or professional, what would it be?
Wow. Well, on a personal level, of course, my son, who is now 13, and helping him navigate the world and navigate social media and navigate what he wants to do in life would definitely be my biggest accomplishment on a personal level. And I'm super excited that I now have a baby on the way with Casey here. And yeah, we're due in July. So super excited about that. So on a personal level, those are ranked as my highest accomplishments. Professionally, my biggest accomplishment to date, you know, when you work with so many creative and talented people, there's so many cool things that I've got to do throughout my career. And I've got to meet super interesting people who like to get things done. And what I like to do is work with people who like to get things done. And working with one guy that I got to work with was Ryan Long. And Ryan Long has a charity in LA called City Gala. And City Gala brings together some of the biggest and the best people in entertainment and features them and highlights them. And when I rolled up to his first event, and there was Richard Branson, there was Diddy, there was Susan Sarandon, and Buzz Aldrin. and getting to meet these people, work with them, and then get introduced like on a personal level because I knew Ryan, and get to do that was really a crowning achievement of like when you really aim big, it's amazing that you'll attract people, the right people to help you kind of open up doors to help you get, because you'll naturally get to wherever you want to go. And so I always tell people, think big, because like we're working with the Kardashians and Kris Jenner on that MASH lot, even though complete failed as a business, it was kind of a really fun process to work to make things happen. And I remember a lot of my friends in the marketing and advertising world would call me up and say, John, I think you're one of the first people in this town to ever work with a Kardashian, on any level. And I was like, really? And they were like, yeah, you should, write a paper about it. And I was like, I don't know, like, I'm sure there's some like sort of like non-disclosure agreements. I'm not allowed to say too many things, but those are the pieces that I really enjoy, because I really enjoy making things happen on a big level, and I will constantly always do that. So
that's amazing, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I got one left, and then it's your turn. I promise. All right, how many people are brand new to sales? Raise your hand. Brand new to sales. How many people are in the mix? Okay. And then how many people are just here to get free Jamf pens? You guys got pens, right? So you guys know everything about sales. Okay, so if you were one of the people in the mix, or maybe just beginning, right? If you were sitting there, what would you want to hear from somebody at your level? What advice do they need to hear from someone like you right now?
In regards to sales, right?
Yes.
So the first thing, if you're brand new to sales, is I cannot stress enough that constantly connect and constantly get out there. And I've worked with a lot of different groups of people in sales throughout the years. People selling to me, and then people that I'm trying to sell. And everybody always looks at your network and how good you are. So if you're brand new to the Twin Cities, all you got to do is literally go down kind of the top 25 or top 50 influencers on Twitter or influencers on Instagram, connect with them, show up to whatever events they're at, and then start those conversations with different people. And eventually, if you're really into different things, like what I was doing in my marketing and advertising, you're eventually going to work with all these people. And what I did when I first started the marketing agency is I apply the same thing, by the way. So I knew that media was a great way to brand myself. And of course, being brand new and coming out of the printing world and the publishing world, I didn't really know anybody locally. And I was like, okay, I'm going to find the locally owned radio station. And at the time, that was B96 that was changing over to K-Twin. And at the time, I went to the radio station, cold called them. Just went to the radio station and said, hey, what are you guys doing in social media? They're like, well, we're just trying to figure it out. And I'm like, hey, well, why don't we do some stuff on trade? Sat down with their marketing and promotions department and just was really friendly with them. And they kept inviting me back because I was just uber eager. I just wanted to hang out with them, and I was like, cool. And through that, I got to know everybody at the radio station. And then when the radio station became, so then I met like Tony Fly and Eric Perkins and all of these great people. And then I met all the producers and all the on-air talent. And then from there, they were like, well, John, we could use you on this. And what I knew is to connect with the sales guy. So I connected with the sales guy because if the sales team likes you, you're not going anywhere. Like marketing people change all the time, but salespeople, they can find you useful. So I would, go out. I would go out for like a beer at happy hour, and I talk about how social selling and radio, you could do campaigns together to boost each other, and they liked it. And so we went and sold things together, and then through that, because of all the relationships I had, that helped me to get on Fox 9 News, because then the morning show producer, he ended up going to Fox 9, and at Fox 9, he had somebody lined up to be a guest to talk about social media and some apps or something, and the guy canceled at 10 p.m. on a Saturday night, and he was like, John, can you come to Fox 9 tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and talk about something on social media and apps? And I said yes, and I was in Duluth with my family at the Holiday Inn. And I was like, I was like, family, get in the car. We're going back home. So we got home at midnight. I'm going on TV, and I am scared out of my mind. And my first time, super nervous. And I had this ugly mustache because it was November, and it was right before Thanksgiving, and we were talking about using apps for Christmas and selling. And the guy who I was on TV with really liked my ugly mustache. It was so bad. It was like a porn stash or something. And he was like, your wife doesn't like that, does she? And I'm like, hell no, she doesn't like this. And he's like, that's awesome. You should keep it. I'm like, oh, God. And so we clicked immediately, and he was like, hey, could you do a live report for us on Fox 9 from the Mall of America on Black Friday? And he's like, well, get a live truck out there. And I was like, this is great. And so I connected with him. I did that. And then the next month, he was like, hey, it's right before Christmas. Can you do this? And then they just made me a feature on Fox 9. So for 6 years, once a month, I always talked about the hot apps of the month. But that all came from me cold calling a radio station, building relationships that took a year and a half with every single person, because I knew producers and sales teams. I wanted to know everybody from the top down. And interestingly enough, I never got any business directly from the radio station. However, remember that other clients I told you about with the drone and that all the the 7-figure budget and all that? That came from the GM of the radio station was friendly with the VC. They were out at the Loop in North Loop at that bar. I ran into them randomly on a Wednesday night. They were like, hey, come on over, like, introduce all your friends, blah, blah, blah. And then that guy's like, oh, yeah, I just bought this drone company, and boom. And that blossomed, and I got a 7-figure deal out of just randomly showing up on a Wednesday night at a bar, happened to run into some really influential people, which is a general manager of a radio station, and who was hanging out with super awesome people, and that's how it all came. So if you're starting out, how to dial it back into the beginning, which is keep working. You're as good as your network, and if you keep finding the top tier of any industry, anybody, I don't care if it's foodies, I don't care what the hell you're into, put them in your list and check in on them and invite them to different things, and that's how you'll build a good quality network, and then you'll never be broke again because you're as good as your network.
I love this job. Everyone put it together for John. Dude, come here, man. Thank you.
So what do we think? What'd you learn? Well, if you like that, check out coffee&closers.com for upcoming episodes, recordings, and more. And don't forget to check out our sponsors. Each one has been hand-selected. They are best in class. Until next time, we'll see you at the next Coffee and Closers. Cheers.
Say live, come on live a life we love. Gotta live, I said live a life we love.